Chapter 16 of Babbitt. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Mike Vendetti, MikeVendetti.com. Babbitt by Sinclair Lewis. Chapter 16. The certainty that he was not going to be accepted by the McKelveys made Babbitt feel guilty and a little absurd. But he went more regularly to the Elks and a Chamber of Commerce luncheon. He was oratorical regarding the wickedness of strikes, and again he saw himself as a prominent citizen. His clubs and associations were food comfortable to his spirit. Of a decent man in Zenith, it was required that he should belong to one, preferably two or three, of the innumerous lodges and prosperity-boosting lunch clubs. To the Rotarians, the Kiwanis, or the Boosters, to the Oddfellows, Moose, Masons, Redmen, Woodmen, Owls, Eagles, Maccabees, Knights of Pythias, Knights of Columbus, and other secret orders characterized by a high degree of heartiness, sound morals, and reverence for the Constitution. There were 4 reasons for joining these orders. It was the thing to do. It was good for business, since lodge brothers frequently became customers. It gave to Americans unable to become Geheimrat or Commodore such unctuous honorifics as High Worthy Recording Scribe and Grand Hoogow, to add to the commonplace distinctions of colonel, judge, and professor. And it permitted the swaddled American husband to stay away from home for 1 evening a week. The lodge was his pizzeria or pavement cafe. He could shoot pool and talk man talk, and be obscene and valiant. Babbitt was what he called a joiner for all these reasons. Behind the gold and scarlet banner of his public achievements was the dun background of office routine, leases, sales contracts, lists of properties to rent. The evenings of oratory and committees and lodges stimulated him like brandy, but every morning he was sandy-tongued. Week by week he accumulated nervousness. He was in open disagreement with his outside salesman, Stanley Graff, and once, though her charms had always kept him nickerly polite to her, he snarled at Miss McGunn for changing his letters. But in the presence of Paul Riesling he relaxed. At least once a week they fled from maturity. On Saturday they played golf, jeering, "As a golfer you're a fine tennis player." Or they motored all Sunday afternoon, stopping at village lunchrooms to sit on high stools at a counter and drink coffee from thick cups. Sometimes Paul came over in the evening with his violin, and even Zilla was silent as the lonely man who had lost his way and forever crept down unfamiliar roads spun out his dark soul in music. 2. Nothing gave Babbitt more purification and publicity than his labors for the Sunday School. His church, the Chatham Road Presbyterian, was one of the largest and richest, one of the most oaken and velvety in Zenith. The pastor was the Reverend John Jennison Drew, M.A., D.D., LL.D. The M.A. and the D.D. were from Elbert University, Nebraska, and the LL.D. from Waterbury College, Oklahoma. He was eloquent, efficient, and versatile. He presided at meetings for the denunciation of unions or the elevation of domestic service, and confided to the audience that as a poor boy he had carried newspapers. For the Sunday edition of the Evening Advocate he wrote editorials on the manly man's religion and the dollars and cents value of Christianity, which were printed in bold type surrounded by regular border. He often said that he was proud to be known as primarily a business man, and that he certainly was not going to permit old Satan to monopolize all the pep and punch. He was a thin, rustic-faced young man, with gold spectacles and a bang of dull brown hair. But when he hurled himself into oratory he glowed with power. He admitted that he was too much the scholar and poet to imitate the evangelist, Mike Monday, and he had once awakened his fold to new life and to larger collections by the challenge, "My brethren, the real cheapskate is the man who won't lend to the Lord." He had made his church a true community center. It contained everything but a bar. It had a nursery, a Thursday evening supper with a short, bright missionary lecture afterwards, a gymnasium, a fortnightly motion picture show, a library of technical books for young workmen, though unfortunately no young workman ever entered the church except to wash the windows or repair the furnace, and a sewing circle which made short little pants for the children of the poor, while Mrs. Drew read aloud from earnest novels. Though Dr. Drew's theology was Presbyterian, his church building was gracefully Episcopalian. As he said, it had the most perdurable features of those noble ecclesiastical monuments of grand old England, which stand as symbols of the eternity of faith, religious and civil. It was built of cheery iron-spot brick in an improved Gothic style, and the main auditorium had indirect lighting from electric globes in lavish alabaster bowls. On a December morning when the Babbitts went to church, Dr. John Jennison Drew was unusually eloquent. The crowd was immense. 10 brisk young ushers in morning coats with white roses were bringing folding chairs up from the basement. There was an impressive musical program conducted by Sheldon Smeeth, educational director of the Y.M.C.A., who also sang the offertory. Babbitt cared less for this, because some misguided person had taught young Mr. Smeeth to smile, 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 while he was singing. But with all the appreciation of a fellow orator, he admired Dr. Drew's sermon. It had the intellectual quality which distinguished the Chatham Road congregation from the grubby chapels on Smith Street. "At this abundant harvest time of all the year," Dr. Drew chanted, "when, though stormy the sky and laborious the path to the drudging wayfarer, yet the hovering and bodiless spirit swoops back o'er all the labors and desires of the past 12 months, oh, then it seems to me there sounds behind all our apparent failures the golden chorus of greeting from those passed happily on, and lo, on the dim horizon we see behind dolorous clouds the mighty mass of mountains, mountains of melody, mountains of mirth, mountains of might." "I certainly do like a sermon with culture and thought in it," meditated Babbitt. At the end of the service he was delighted when the pastor, actively shaking hands at the door, twittered, "Oh, Brother Babbitt, can you wait a jiffy? Want your advice." "Sure, doctor, you bet." "Drop into my office. I think you'll like the cigars there." Babbitt did like the cigars. He also liked the office, which was distinguished from other offices only by the spirited change of the familiar wall placard to "This is the Lord's busy day." Chum Frink came in, then William W. Eathorne. Mr. Eathorne was the 71-year-old president of the First State Bank of Zenith. He still wore the delicate patches of side whiskers which had been the uniform of bankers in 1870. If Babbitt was envious of the smart set of the McKelveys before William Washington Eathorne, he was reverent. Mr. Eathorne had nothing to do with the smart set. He was above it. He was the great-grandson of one of the 5 men who founded Zenith in 1792, and he was of the 3rd generation of bankers. He could examine credits, make loans, promote or injure a man's business. In his presence Babbitt breathed quickly and felt young. The Reverend Dr. Drew bounced into the room and flowered into speech. "I've asked you gentlemen to stay so I can put on a proposition before you. The Sunday School needs bucking up. It's the 4th largest in Zenith, but there's no reason why we should take anybody's dust. We ought to be first. I want to request you, if you will, to form a committee of advice and publicity for the Sunday School. Look it over and make any suggestions for its betterment, and then, perhaps, see that the press gives us some attention. Give the public some really helpful and constructive news instead of all these murders and divorces." "Excellent," said the banker. Babbitt and Frink were enchanted to join him. 3. If you had asked Babbitt what his religion was, he would have answered in sonorous Boosters' Club rhetoric, "My religion is to serve my fellow man, to honor my brother as myself, and to do my bit to make life happier for one and all." If you had pressed him for more detail, he would have announced, "I'm a member of the Presbyterian Church, and naturally I accept its doctrines." If you had been so brutal as to go on, he would have protested, "There's no use discussing and arguing about religion. It just stirs up bad feeling." Actually, the content of his theology was that there was a Supreme Being who had tried